Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Empire, and I'm going to be facing off against the Greenskins. So definitely a very fun matchup in terms of the lore, and always a good time. So let's go ahead and jump right into the army composition. So as far as my leadership goes, I have a General of the Empire and Empire Captain, both of whom are rocking the potions. Then I also have a Warrior Priest, so I've actually kind of been playing with this little synergy here. I like to use the Royal Altdorf GRYPHITES, who are just absolute beasts. They're armored, armor-piercing, anti-large, and they do cause terror. So against like Orc Boarboy Biggins, who are very good in the Empire versus Greenskin matchup, these guys will terrify them, cause them to run away, and are very, very cost-effective in that matchup. But I also send a Warrior Priest with them. So the Warrior Priest is, for one thing, he's pretty good at breaking the charge, though he isn't heavily armored. He also has that damage debuff ability. So, well, it's not a debuff, it's a buff, which lowers the damage your units take by about 22%, which is really, really nice in those tight cav battles. So I really like to send him with the Royal Altdorf GRYPHITES over here. So as far as my main army goes, I have some spearmen in the flank, so here in the back, and then also on the eastern flank over here. So these guys are just here to kind of deal with cycle charging and, you know, all those other type of periphery threats. In the front line, I have some great swords here, which are essentially just going to deal with black orcs. I also have the Tattersouls here, who are just so much fun in this matchup. They just come in such large numbers. They actually have 7,000 HP. I never actually looked at that, but I feel like that's a lot. But it's really nice if your opponent has like a huge Zerg that's coming and you know that you need to hold them and, you know, at the same time do a little bit of damage. The Tattersouls are a pretty good choice for that. I also have a Bright Wizard here with the Lure of Fire with the Cascading Fire Cloak, as well as the Flaming Sword of Ruin. I have 2 crossbowmen and then an additional group of spearmen like I mentioned before. So that's pretty much it for my army. And then also I should probably mention that I do have a cannon, which is pretty good for kind of poking at black orcs. So as you can see, the cannon's done a little bit of damage and has actually taken out, 5 models already. So pretty good investment there. So as far as my opponent's army composition goes, he has a pretty healthy mixture of Orc Biggins, Black Orcs, which are both very good against the Empire because he can send the Black Orcs on my Greatswords and then the Biggins on my squishier infantry like the Tattersouls and, you know, the Spearmen, and they'll just cut them to shreds. So very well played in terms of his army selection. He also has a Night Goblin Shaman, who is very, very fun. And then he has a lot of Orc Boarboy Biggins, which are so good in the Empire matchup. They're armor-piercing, anti-large, they're good against Empire leadership, good against Cav, just a very, very solid unit for how much you're paying, in my opinion. He also has an Orc War Boss. He has some Goblin Archers back here. He has 2 Goblin Rock Lobbers. He has some Goblin Wolf Riders, as well as Forest Goblin Spider Riders, which are very good. If you can get those like focused on my GRYPHITES and slow them down and allow these Biggins and the War Boss to get on my units, it's going to be very, very good for him. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, guys. Should be a fun one. So he starts by shooting his Goblin Rock Lobbers at my GRYPHITES. So I actually pull back a little bit because losing a single model of the GRYPHITES is really devastating. They're a very, very strong unit, but on that same coin, they do come in small numbers like most Demogryph Knights do, and it's definitely not fun. So he immediately realizes that he's probably not going to hit them, and he switches to my Greatswords here, so he's doing some pretty good damage. Those Goblin Rock Lobbers are definitely not disappointing and are landing among my troops, but the Flagellants are certainly not deterred. They're definitely going to go do some battle for Sigmar, and you can see the Bright Wizard here is encouraging all of the troops. So on that same note, my opponent does start to advance, but he at the same time is taking a lot of losses to these Black Orcs. They've already lost 13 models, and things are definitely going pretty well for me. So I definitely wanted to invest in the battle over here on the western side of the map. So I brought my leadership over here, and I have the GRYPHITES as well as the Warrior Priest, and I will be pulling my Bright Wizard over here shortly because I feel that, you know, even if he does get a relatively optimal engagement in terms of his charging, the GRYPHITES with the Warrior Priest and the 2, you know, Empire Captain and the General of the Empire are going to be such a force to be reckoned with. So he actually does a really good play. He uses the Goblin Wolf Riders, who are very fast. They're much faster than the GRYPHITES, so he actually locks me down here. He kind of forces me into a fight, which of course, you know, the GRYPHITES are going to absolutely dominate, and I haven't lost a model yet, but on that same coin, it allows the Forest Goblin Spider Riders to start shooting. Now that they're poisoned, you can see that, you know, things are starting to tank a little bit for him. So I do pull my General of the Empire in to break the charge of these Orc Boarboy Biggins, which was probably a little bit hasty, but it does allow the GRYPHITES to kind of regroup back here and swing up and around. So in the front line, things are going pretty well. The Spearmen have engaged with the Biggins, which obviously isn't optimal, but the Greatswords are in here with the Black Orcs and are doing, you know, it's a relatively even battle. But my opponent does use the Itchy Nuisance, which lowers their weapon damage and their melee attack, so very well played there, as I am using my Bright Wizard primarily on the other side of the battlefield. So the Tattersouls are in here just doing battle with the Biggins, and this is actually a decent matchup for the Tattersouls. They'll definitely get a fair amount of kills here, but at the same time, they're going to take a massive beating from the 42 weapon damage of these units. And again, I do have these crossbowmen who are getting some pretty decent shots over here on the Biggins, who are low armored, so they're going to take some serious losses from the missile fire. So back to the kind of crazy battle over here. So right now it's kind of just evolved into a massive kind of cluster here, but you can see the GRYPHITES and, you know, my other leadership units have already terrified these units, and you can see they're going to run away, and I actually have the cover of the trees. So a lot of these Biggins, you guys can see, are actually caught up on the trees, and they're not getting a good engagement here. So it was actually pretty surprising. and he was focusing most of his efforts on my General of the Empire, and I did use a Potion of Toughness as well as the Potion of Foolhardiness to make sure that got off. You can see the Warrior Priest is in here just being an absolute gangster. He's got a pile of orcs around him, and he's just pimp slapping people with his hammer there. So the Bright Wizard on that same coin is casting the Flaming Sword of Ruin to give me a ton of damage. The GRYPHITES have taken a fair amount of losses, but they've also devastated these guys, and I had them focusing the Orc War Boss, who you can see is essentially broken, and he's, you know, almost dead, but he most likely still has his potion and will be able to use that. So I also do have the cannon over there shooting at these kind of biggins over here in the distance, and unfortunately he does still have those rock lobbers online, so I was kind of bummed. But at that point you can see most of his units are either terrified or broken, and the forces have gotten free, and they're going to charge in here and do battle with these Orc Warboy biggins. The Orc Warboy biggins do have anti-large and armor piercing, but these GRYPHITES are just, you know, next level troops, especially when they're supported by a fairly healthy General of the Empire, a Bright Wizard, as well as a Warrior Priest. He's providing that nice damage debuff. And he also has several other passive abilities, which are very, very cost effective. So I did, these Goblin Archers were definitely starting to annoy me, so I bring the GRYPHITES over who just run through them and do some serious damage. And it's so cool having this kind of goon squad here with the Warrior Priest, you know, providing those buffs, and the Bright Wizard. But my opponent's still hot on my tail. He has these big ones chasing me, so I definitely didn't want to engage. I did take some losses on the GRYPHITES, but still I have 13 models and fairly healthy leadership here, where, you know, most of his Orc Warboy big ones took a beating, and the Orc Warboss did heal through his potions, but, you know, again, he's going to have to come back, and, you know, he's in a dangerous spot now for sure. But my opponent did pretty well in the melee engagement. My missile troops are still in good shape, but he did get a group of Orc biggins back here who are definitely chasing down these poor spearmen and giving them a hard time. But my cannon is still online and is shooting at these guys point blank, which is nice. Hopefully it'll be able to fend them off before they do get to these crossbowmen, but it's not looking likely. So in the main line, my opponent uses the Itchy Nuisance right as I engage, but regardless, these GRYPHITES are going to come in here and just terrify a ton of these biggins. And you can see the Warrior Priest there as well. And I believe I did use my Bombardment ability. But was that my opponent? Yeah, it was the Bombardment, which is pretty good. I actually really like it. I don't think it does a ton of damage, but it's still very awesome. So he still has his Rock Lobbers online, which are shooting me and doing pretty good damage. But now that my heroic forces have come back and kind of outmaneuvered the biggins in many ways, because you can see they're having to come from all the way over here. But I form a new Zerg ball here. I still have a fair amount of Flagellants and Spearmen who are just going to tear apart these Forest Goblin Spider Riders here. And he does have these biggins coming back, but my General of the Empire is still pretty healthy, at about 80% health, and I do have the Warrior Priest in good shape, and you know, these crossbowmen have also recovered. They were definitely getting chased down, but and also some greatswords coming back, which I definitely cannot complain about. Some biggins over here, and let's go ahead and take an overhead view and see what's left. So he has the Goblin Big Boss, who is taking a beating from my heroic units. He also has a fairly healthy group of biggins here, but they're about to get run down pretty hard, and even though they do have a small anti-large bonus, it will definitely not save them from the GRYPHITES as well as the other heroic units. And also, despite all that, I still do have some infantry. The Flagellants definitely fighting to the bitter end, and the Spearmen are actually still in it. Pretty surprised about that, but you know, this might be all she wrote, as most of my opponent's forces are kind of crumbled or running off the battlefield, with the exception of the War Boss, who is about to get crushed here by the GRYPHITES and the rest of the Goon Squad. So definitely a very stylish finish right here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that Empire Battlecast. Definitely, you know, made some mistakes this game, but again, learned a lot from it and had a good time. So the Warrior Priest did a pretty decent job. He provided that kind of periodic damage resistance to the GRYPHITES, which, you know, again, they were down to about, you know, 10 or 11 models, but, you know, if he hadn't been there, it could have been a lot more, especially in that really tight engagement when I was relatively surrounded by the biggins. So I think that made a big difference. And also the fact that these guys caused terror was really, really strong. You can see I was surrounded, and a lot of the biggins and both the traditional biggins and the Orc Warboy biggins were periodically routing in and out, and that was definitely very helpful. The Greatswords did okay. This group definitely got punished by the Black Orcs. You can see my opponent was very effective at using his Night Goblin Shaman, whereas I was using my Lord of Fire buffs elsewhere, so his infantry line definitely did really, really good. And also, the Rock Lobbers were very annoying. I was surprised. But personally, I'm more of a fan of the Doom Divers, even though they don't have the armor piercing. I really like the fact that they're accurate, and you can sick them on cav units. Like with Doom Divers, you could have put them on the GRYPHITES, and though they wouldn't pierce the armor in the same way, I think it would have generated a lot of value. But again, arguments can be made for the Rock Lobber because they are quite a bit cheaper and allow you to get other units. So again, very well played to my opponent, XV Bison. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that Empire Battlecast. Have an excellent night, and take care.